What I want to propose here, sitting in Union Square here in New York City, I want to propose a kind of counter-extremism project on the Homefront, a kind of counter-tribalism, a way to bring more Americans together, talking to Americans, and to find better ways to use multimedia platforms and other venues of outreach and dissemination to better connect with target audiences and resonate across people from coast to coast, across race, across ideology, and across demographics, to get people talking to each other across Black Lives Matter and retired police officers, people in the conservative movement, talking to people within Occupy Wall Street about what they share in common in areas where they both tend to agree there's a problem, such as justice reform, police reform, areas where a government can be more responsive to genuine complaints from citizens. The way we incarcerate people and execute the drug war has complaints across the board. It garners frustration across the political spectrum, and yet we don't seem to be cooperating, except in rare circumstances, on these issues. So there's a science of divisive, manipulative propaganda, a kind of divide and conquer that's been borne out across this country for the last several decades, going back to Nixon and Reagan. And I am well versed in the science. I see it every day on the television. It's absolutely soul-crushing, and we have to find a way to fight back. And I think our veterans, people who've been working in very complex cultural environments, very divided tribal societies, who've operated on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan, can also help serve our communities, can be involved in building our neighborhoods or working with residents and generously listening to what's going on and helping foster dialogue and conversation. I think retired police officers who are able to speak freely can come together and try to break down this blue shield and get people willing to have conversations with people in the activist community, with people in our neighborhoods, and identify a win-win scenario where everybody is better off, where we have a community policing system that allows police to connect with residents, operate in the area, build a kind of rapport, earn the trust of people they're working with, and everybody thrives better when that happens. This is something our veterans understand working in Iraq and Afghanistan. You have to connect with the local population and avoid the kinds of misunderstandings that precipitate dangerous conflict. It is the same thing in our neighborhoods. The way we police many of these communities and the perverse incentives we have, like asset forfeiture laws and these shakedown systems they have in many of our small towns where police focus on collecting revenue at the expense of good policing. This is a policy problem that our leaders have to pull their heads out of their ass and finally address. We're starting to see the blowback of decades of built-in resentment and frustration due to marginalizing of communities and a serious divide, a break of social contract that many minorities across the country have felt in a very deep and powerful way across our communities and in ways most of us will never understand. And this is starting to reach a tipping point, a catalyst that is riveting across our communities, that is unleashing this kind of misunderstanding where both sides, most people in the police system and in our protest communities and most people in these neighborhoods are fundamentally peaceful people. They want us to thrive and work together, but there's a minority of bad apples and it fuels a vicious cycle. And these conditions allow this to happen. We have to break this cycle. We have to find better ways for people to come together across the political spectrum, identify these problems, speak honestly about these problems, and put the kind of pressure on our leaders to reform the system. Police officers and Black Lives Matter should be part of the conversation. Skeptics, free thinkers, and science advocates should be part of the conversation. People in the conservative movement should be part of the conversation. People that listen to people that are fans of Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder or Molly Yiannopoulos should all want to be part of this dialogue and identify what we agree on and highlight our commonalities more than our differences. And the very paradigm in which we have these conversations, this tribal basis of disagreement, enshrining a kind of douchebaggery into the very fabric of our discourse, where we're more prone to demonize others outside our community and outside our group, outside our political tribe, and we're less prone to listen to arguments outside our group, and we're less likely to see our blind spots. And this makes us dogmatic, it makes us stupid, it makes us ideological, it shuts our mind off to the very spirit of science and skepticism that propelled us from the dark ages all the way to the moon. The spirit of science, the willingness to be skeptical, to listen to arguments, to expose yourself to different views, to be willing to be wrong, to look at evidence and facts, to look at the data and change your mind. That is the basis of our political conversations run diametrically against every single one of these values. This is a problem on the left and the right. So we need an overhaul of how we have these discussions. And we need to move forward across the spectrum and find ways to do it. And that means multimedia platforms and better ways to resonate and connect with target audiences. And people with a background in things like psychological warfare, information ops, special operations, people who have worked in Iraq and Afghanistan. Let's get to these veterans with these backgrounds. Talking to people who are in advertising, talking to marketers, talking to people who understand and go up the same science of cognitive and behavioral psychology and moral psychology. And let's understand how to connect across the American landscape and build a kind of conversation that resonates with more people and fights back. Thank you.